The divorce papers hit the granite countertop with a finality that rang louder than any graduation bell. Mark adjusted his silk tie, refusing to make eye contact, and muttered, "I need a wife, Serena, not a perpetual student. I'm done carrying you." He walked out the door, convinced he had just cut loose a financial anchor. He had no idea that the student he just abandoned was exactly 45 minutes away from walking into a boardroom to sign the largest biotech acquisition deal of the decade. Mark thought he was divorcing a burden. He didn't realize he was divorcing a woman who was about to become a billionaire. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the apartment on West 81st Street in Manhattan, casting long, pale shadows across the living room. It was a Tuesday in May. Specifically, it was May 14th, Serena Vance's graduation day. For 3 years, Serena had subsisted on 4 hours of sleep a night, stale coffee, and the sheer force of will. Today, she was finally receiving her doctorate in biochemistry from Columbia University. It should have been a day of champagne and relief. Instead, the air in the apartment was thick enough to choke on. Mark Sterling, her husband of 5 years, stood by the kitchen island. He was dressed in his signature navy bespoke suit, the one he wore when he had to fire someone at his mid-level marketing firm. He checked his Rolex Submariner, a gift Serena had bought him with her savings 2 years ago, and sighed loud enough to be heard in the hallway. "Serena, are you even listening to me?" Mark's voice was calm, which made it worse. It was the voice of a man who had rehearsed this speech in the mirror. Serena stood frozen near the coffee machine, her hand trembling slightly as she held a mug that said, "Future CEO." She set it down slowly. "I'm listening, Mark. I'm just trying to understand the timing. Today? You're doing this today?" Mark picked up a manila envelope from the counter and slid it across the marble surface. It stopped inches from her hand. "There is no good time, Serena," he said, his tone dripping with condescending patience. "But frankly, I didn't want to sit through a 3-hour ceremony pretending to be proud of you for delaying adulthood for another few years." The words felt like a physical slap. Serena looked at him, really looked at him. He was handsome in a conventional, polished way, square jaw, expertly styled blonde hair, but his eyes were cold. They were the eyes of a man who looked at relationships like balance sheets. "Delaying adulthood?" Serena repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Mark, I've been working on a synthetic protein sequence that could revolutionize how we treat autoimmune diseases. This isn't a hobby. This is my life's work." Mark laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "It's a science project, Serena. And while you've been playing in the lab, who has been paying the mortgage? Who has been paying for the dinners, the vacations? Me. I've been carrying us. And I'm tired. I want a partner who contributes to the real world, not someone chasing academic fantasies." He walked around the island, closing the distance between them, but he didn't reach out to touch her. He smelled of sandalwood and expensive detachment. "I met someone," he added casually, as if mentioning the weather. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "You what?" "Her name is Jessica. She's a VP at the firm. She's grounded. She makes real money. She understands the pressure I'm under. We're on the same level." He adjusted his cufflinks. "I've already moved my things to the guest room for the last week, but I'll be staying at a hotel tonight. I want you out of this apartment by the end of the month. It's in my name, after all." Serena felt a strange sensation. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was clarity. For years she had dimmed her light to make Mark feel bigger. When she won grants, she downplayed the amount. When she was published in major journals, she didn't frame the articles. She had played the role of the struggling student wife so he could feel like the provider, the big man. "You think I'm a burden," Serena stated flatly. "I think you're a sweet girl, Serena, but you're stagnant. You have zero ambition for the things that actually matter: status, wealth, stability." Mark checked his watch again. "Look, sign the papers. It's a standard separation. You keep your student debt. I keep my assets. It's fair." He tapped the envelope. "Happy graduation, Serena. Do yourself a favor. Get a job as a lab tech or a teacher. Stop dreaming." With that, Mark Sterling turned on his heel and walked out of the apartment. The door clicked shut, leaving Serena alone in the silence. She stared at the door for a full minute. Then she looked down at the envelope. She didn't cry. The tears simply wouldn't come. Instead, a vibration buzzed against her hip. She pulled her phone from her pocket. It was an encrypted message on the Signal app. The sender ID was just a single letter: J. The message read, "The board of directors at Chimera Global is assembled. The valuation stands at $800 million. We need the founder's signature at 11 a.m. Are you ready, Dr. Vance?" Serena looked at the divorce papers, then back at the phone. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Mark," she whispered to the empty room, "you have absolutely no idea what you just threw away." Serena moved with mechanical precision. She walked into the bedroom, the room she had shared with a man who thought she was worthless, and opened the back of her closet. Pushed behind a row of modest cardigans and jeans was a garment bag from Bergdorf Goodman. She unzipped it. Inside wasn't a graduation gown. It was a suit. But not just any suit. It was a custom-tailored charcoal power suit from Tom Ford, sharp enough to cut glass. Beside it sat a pair of Louboutin heels she had bought 3 months ago in secret. She shed the oversized t-shirt and sweatpants Mark was so used to seeing her in. She dressed slowly, watching herself in the full-length mirror. As the fabric contoured to her body, the struggling student vanished. In her place stood the CEO of Vance Biosynth, a ghost company that had been operating in stealth mode for 24 months. While Mark thought she was studying late at the library, Serena had been in video conferences with investors in Zurich and Tokyo. While Mark thought she was writing a thesis, she was patenting a proprietary enzyme that could break down microplastics in the human bloodstream, a discovery that every major pharmaceutical company in the world was currently fighting to acquire. She applied a layer of red lipstick, Ruby Woo by MAC, and tied her hair back into a severe, elegant bun. She grabbed her battered leather satchel, dumped the contents on the bed, and transferred her laptop and the encrypted hard drive into a sleek Hermes briefcase. She walked back to the kitchen and picked up the divorce papers. She didn't sign them. Instead, she took a sticky note and wrote 3 words: "See you in court." She stuck it to the envelope and left it right where Mark had placed it. She walked out of the apartment building and hailed a cab. "Where to, miss?" the driver asked. "Columbia University first," Serena said, checking her phone. "Then 30 Rockefeller Plaza." The ride to the university was a blur of New York traffic. Serena's phone was blowing up with notifications, but she ignored them all except for one. It was from her attorney and business partner, David Cohen. "David, I hope you're sitting down. Chimera just upped the offer. They want exclusive rights to the Asian market too. They're offering an additional $50 million in stock options. Total deal value is pushing $850. Julian Thorne is flying in personally to shake your hand." Julian Thorne. The name sent a shiver through the industry. He was the CEO of Chimera Global, a man known for eating startups for breakfast. He was ruthless, brilliant, and notoriously private. If Julian Thorne was coming, this wasn't just a deal. It was a coronation. The cab pulled up to the gates of Columbia. The campus was swarming with families, balloons and students in Columbia blue gowns. Serena paid the driver and stepped out. She wasn't wearing a gown. She had no intention of walking across the stage today. She scanned the crowd. She needed to find her parents, who had flown in from Ohio. They were the only ones who knew the truth, or at least part of it. They knew she had done well with her research, but even they didn't know the dollar amount. Serena. She turned to see her mother, Sarah, waving frantically near the statue of Alma Mater. Her father, John, was beaming, holding a bouquet of cheap bodega flowers that meant more to Serena than anything Mark had ever bought her. "Diverse?" her mother asked, confused, looking at Serena's power suit. "Where is your cap and gown? The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. Serena hugged them both tight, inhaling the scent of her father's aftershave. "Mum, Dad, listen to me. There's been a change of plans. I'm not walking today." "What?" Her father's face fell. "But honey, we came all this way. Did something happen? Did you fail a class?" "No, Dad." Serena laughed, a genuine bubbling sound. "I didn't fail. I graduated weeks ago, technically. But something came up. Something life-changing." She pulled them into a quieter corner near the library steps. "You know that project I've been working on? The enzyme?" "The plastic thingy." Her mum nodded. "Yes. Well, a company wants to buy it. Today. Right now." "That's wonderful." Her dad patted her shoulder. "Will they pay you enough to pay off those student loans? Maybe a nice down payment on a house so you and Mark can stop renting?" Serena's expression hardened at the mention of Mark. "Mark and I are over, Dad. He asked for a divorce this morning." Her parents gasped in unison. "On your graduation day?" Her mother looked ready to fight. "Where is he? I'll hit him with my purse." "It doesn't matter," Serena said, her voice steely. "Because the company buying my research. Dad, they aren't paying me enough for a down payment. They're paying me $850 million. The silence between the three of them was absolute. The noise of the marching band in the distance seemed to fade away. 800, her father stammered, his face losing color. "Million? Yes. But I have to go sign the papers now. I need you both to trust me. Go to the ceremony, clap for my friends, and then I'm sending a car to pick you up. We're going to dinner. Anywhere you want." "Serena," her mother whispered, grabbing her arm. "Does Mark know?" Serena looked toward the subway station, imagining Mark sitting in his office, flirting with Jessica, thinking he had discarded a dead weight. "No," Serena smiled, and it was terrifying. "He thinks I'm unemployed, and I'm going to make sure he keeps thinking that until I'm ready to bury him." Just then, a sleek black Maybach pulled up to the curb, disregarding the no-stopping signs. A driver in a full uniform stepped out and opened the rear door. "Dr. Vance," the driver said. "Mr. Thorne is waiting." Serena kissed her stunned parents on the cheek. "I'll see you tonight." She slid into the leather interior of the car. As the door closed, sealing her in silence and luxury, she pulled out her phone and blocked Mark's number. The weeping student was gone. The shark had entered the water. The elevator ride to the 65th floor of 30 Rockefeller Plaza felt less like an ascent and more like a pressure equalization chamber. Serena checked her reflection in the polished brass doors. The woman staring back at her wasn't the graduate student who clipped coupons for ramen noodles. She was a predator entering a new ecosystem. The doors slid open, revealing a reception area larger than her entire apartment. It was all minimalist Italian marble, abstract sculptures that looked dangerously expensive, and a silence so profound it felt heavy. "Dr. Vance, right this way." A receptionist with a headset that looked like jewelry gestured toward a set of double-frosted glass doors. Waiting outside the doors was David Cohen, her attorney. David was a pit bull in a pinstripe suit, a man who lived for high-stakes litigation. Yet even he looked pale today. "You look terrified, David," Serena murmured as she approached. "I'm not terrified of the deal, Serena. I'm terrified of the man inside," David whispered rapidly. "Julian Thorne isn't just an investor. He's an apex predator. He doesn't just want the enzyme. He wants to own the mind that created it. He's going to test you. Don't flinch." "I'm done flinching for men," Serena said, her voice ice cold. "Let's go." David pushed the doors open. The boardroom of Chimera Global commanded a panoramic view of Manhattan. Central Park stretched out like a green rug beneath them. But no one was looking out the windows. Around a 20-foot table made of reclaimed ancient Kari wood sat 12 men and 2 women representing the highest echelons of global finance and biotech. The air smelled of espresso and aggressive cologne. As Serena entered, the conversation ceased instantly. 14 pairs of eyes assessed her. They expected an academic, perhaps brilliant, but socially awkward in an ill-fitting suit. They didn't expect the vision in Tom Ford that walked in with the stride of a runway model and the eyes of a killer. At the head of the table sat Julian Thorne. He didn't stand up. He didn't need to. Julian Thorne, at 42, possessed a kind of dangerous magnetism that filled the room. He was darkly handsome, with eyes the color of a frozen lake, piercing, intelligent, and utterly devoid of warmth. He was tapping a solid gold fountain pen against the table in a slow, rhythmic beat. "Dr. Vance," Thorne said. His voice was a low baritone that seemed to vibrate in the floorboards. "You're late." It was a power move. She was exactly on time. "Mr. Thorne," Serena replied, gliding to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table, deliberately not taking the seat offered next to him. She placed her briefcase on the table with a decisive clack. "Punctuality is relative when you're holding the keys to the next trillion-dollar industry. I assume we can skip the pleasantries?" A ripple of surprised murmurs went around the table. Nobody spoke to Julian Thorne like that. Thorne stopped tapping the pen. A ghost of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Indeed. My analysts have spent the last 48 hours trying to tear your patent application apart. They failed. Your synthetic enzyme, Vance Protocol Alpha, actually works. It breaks down polyethylene terephthalate in the human bloodstream at a rate of 94% within 24 hours. 96%, Serena corrected him smoothly. "I ran a final optimization simulation this morning before my previous engagement." Thorne leaned forward. "Impressive. But science in a lab is different from global scalability. Chimera Global isn't interested in science projects. We're interested in market dominance. Why should I trust a newly minted PhD with no corporate experience to head the research division of an $850 million acquisition?" This was the test. Mark would have crumbled under this gaze. Mark would have stammered about his credentials. Serena leaned forward too, matching his intensity across 20 feet of rare wood. "Because, Mr. Thorne, I'm not just a scientist. I'm someone who spent 5 years starving in a basement lab while everyone told me it was impossible, all while managing a household for a man who thought my work was a cute hobby. I understand efficiency because I had to create greatness with 0 resources. You're not buying my corporate experience. You're buying my hunger, and right now, I'm starving." The silence stretched for 5 agonizing seconds. Thorne stared at her, his cold eyes assessing every micro-expression on her face. He was looking for fear. He found none. Thorne slowly capped his gold pen. He stood up. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. "Gentlemen, ladies," Thorne said, his eyes never leaving Serena's, "give us the room." It wasn't a request. The 12 executives and David Cohen scattered like cockroaches when the lights turn on. Within 30 seconds, Serena Vance and Julian Thorne were alone in the vast boardroom. Julian Thorne walked slowly around the table. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He was taller than he looked, and he moved with the coiled grace of a panther. He stopped a few feet from Serena, leaning casually against the window, the city sprawling below him. "You're angry, Dr. Vance," Thorne observed quietly. It wasn't an accusation, it was a statement of fact. "Is that relevant to the acquisition?" Serena asked, keeping her guard up. "It's entirely relevant. Emotion drives innovation, or it destroys it. I need to know which kind of anger you have. Is it the kind that burns the house down, or the kind that builds an empire out of the ashes?" Serena thought about Mark. She thought about the divorce papers sitting on their kitchen counter. She thought about Jessica's smug existence. "The second one," she replied. Thorne nodded slowly. "Good. Because I did a background check on you this morning. Standard procedure. It seems your husband, Mr. Mark Sterling, filed for divorce at Ansin today." Serena felt a jolt of adrenaline. "Your resources are thorough. They are absolute. So tell me, Serena, and I'm asking this man to woman, not CEO to founder, are you signing this deal today to save the world from microplastics? Or are you signing it to become the most powerful weapon your ex-husband has ever seen?" Serena looked him dead in the eyes. There was no point in lying to a man like Julian Thorne. He saw everything anyway. "Both," she said, "but mostly the weapon part." For the first time, Julian Thorne laughed. It was a dark, rich sound that surprised her. "I like you, Serena Vance. You're ruthless. I thought I was buying a brilliant scientist. It turns out I'm buying a vindictive genius. That's much more profitable." He walked back to the head of the table and pressed a button on the intercom. "Send the lawyers back in with the final draft. We're signing." 5 minutes later, the papers were spread out. The numbers were staggering. $850 million total valuation, $400 million upfront in cash, the rest in stock options and performance bonuses over 3 years. Serena would retain a 10% stake and remain as Chief Scientific Officer with a salary of $2 million a year. Her hand didn't shake as she picked up the pen. She signed her name, Dr. Serena Vance. With that signature, the struggling student ceased to exist. She was now one of the wealthiest self-made women in New York City. David Cohen looked like he might faint from relief. Thorne merely popped open a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon that had appeared from a hidden refrigerator. He poured 2 glasses and handed one to Serena. "To partnerships born in hell," Thorne toasted, clinking his glass against hers. The champagne tasted like victory. Cold, sharp, and expensive victory. While Serena was sipping $100 bubbly in a penthouse boardroom, Mark Sterling was checking into the Standard Hotel in the meatpacking district. The room was overpriced and trendy, exactly the kind of place Mark thought successful men stayed. He threw his suit jacket on the bed and loosened his tie, a profound sense of relief washing over him. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Hey, baby," he murmured when Jessica answered. "Did you do it?" Jessica's voice was husky. She was currently in her office at Mark's firm, pretending to work on a spreadsheet. "It's done. I dropped the bomb this morning. God, you should have seen her face. She looked like a kicked puppy. I almost felt bad." "Almost?" Mark laughed, pouring himself a whiskey from the minibar. "Did she cry?" Jessica asked cruelly. Surprisingly, no. She just stood there, in her pajamas, looking pathetic. "I told her to be out by the end of the month. Finally, Jess. No more dead weight. No more financing her endless studies. We're free." "Good," Jessica purred, "because I booked us a table at Le Bernardin tonight to celebrate. It's going to cost a fortune." "Baby, I just shed a major financial liability. We can afford it. I'm the man of the house now. I make the real money." Mark hung up, feeling like the king of New York. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. He felt lighter, unburdened. He had traded in an old, boring model for a sleek, new, ambitious one. His phone buzzed with an email notification. It was an automated alert from his bank. Subject: Joint account alert. Overdraft warning. Mark frowned. He clicked open the email. "Your joint checking account ending in 44590 has been overdrawn by $12,500. The current balance is $12,450. Mark stared at the screen. That was the account he used to pay the mortgage. The account he had explicitly told Serena not to touch 2 years ago when he took over the finances for her own good. "What the hell, Serena?" he muttered, anger replacing his relief. She must have gone on a spiteful shopping spree the second he left. A pathetic, last-ditch effort to hurt him. He was about to call her and scream at her, to tell her he was cutting off her access immediately, when another notification popped up. This one was from a real estate app he had forgotten he even had installed. Alert: New listing in your building. Penthouse A, 81st Street. Listed for $22,000 month. Mark felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Penthouse A? That was the top floor of their current building, the one with the wraparound terrace that he always gazed at with envy. Who could afford $22,000 a month in rent? His phone rang. It wasn't Serena. It was the building superintendent. "Mr. Sterling. Hi, it's Gary downstairs. Listen, I'm confused. I just got a work order from the owner of Penthouse A. They want me to move all the furniture from your unit, apartment 4B, up to the penthouse immediately." Mark gripped the phone tighter. "Gary, what are you talking about? I didn't rent the penthouse, and I certainly didn't authorize moving my furniture." "Well, that's the thing, Mr. Sterling. The lease wasn't signed by you. It was signed about 20 minutes ago by Dr. Vance. She paid a full year's rent up front, in cash. She said to move her things up and to leave yours on the curb." Mark Sterling drove his leased BMW X5 like a maniac up Amsterdam Avenue, weaving through taxi traffic and blasting his horn. The euphoria of his freedom had evaporated, replaced by a frantic, clawing confusion. Gary must be insane, Mark thought, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Serena doesn't have $20, let alone 20,000. She probably forged a check. She's having a breakdown. "That's it," she snapped. He clung to this theory because the alternative was too terrified to entertain. The alternative was that the universe had shifted beneath his feet without his permission. He screeched to a halt in front of their pre-war building on West 81st Street. He didn't even bother parking properly. He just threw the car into park next to a hydrant and jumped out. The scene on the sidewalk stopped him cold. There, piled haphazardly on the dirty concrete, was his life. His Italian leather sofa sat at a jaunty angle against a lamp-post. His collection of vintage vinyl records was stacked in a cardboard box that was slowly getting wet from a leaking air conditioner above. And there, fluttering in the gentle breeze like surrendered flags, were his silk ties. Gary, the building superintendent, was standing guard over the pile with a clipboard, looking apologetic. "Gary!" Mark roared, storming over. "What the hell is this? I'm going to sue the building. I'm going to sue you personally." Gary held up a hand. "Mr. Sterling, please, I'm just following orders from the tenant of Penthouse A." "I am the tenant of apartment 4B," Mark shouted, grabbing a handful of his own shirts from the pile. "Serena has no right to do this. She's my wife." Actually, a cool voice drifted from the building's entrance. "According to the papers you served me this morning, I'm just a financial burden you needed to offload." Mark spun around. Serena stood in the glass doorway, but it wasn't the Serena he had left 5 hours ago. that Serena wore oversized sweats and looked tired. This Serena was wearing a charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than Mark's car. She was holding a glass of champagne, leaning against the doorframe with a casual, terrifying elegance. She looked taller, sharper. Mark stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Serena? Where did you get that suit? Why are my things on the street? Serena took a sip of champagne. Well, Mark, you said you wanted me out of apartment 4B by the end of the month. I decided to leave early. I moved upstairs. And since you said you wanted to keep your assets, and I keep my student debt, I figured you'd want your furniture. I bought new things. Better things. You can't afford Penthouse A. Mark laughed, a desperate cracking sound. You can't even afford the electric bill, Serena. Stop this charade. Who gave you the money? Did you borrow it from your parents? They're going to be bankrupt because of you. Serena didn't answer. She simply pointed a manicured finger toward the corner of 81st and Columbus, where a massive digital billboard sat atop a bank building. Look, she said. Mark turned. The billboard was cycling through news headlines. It flashed a weather update, a sports score, and then a breaking news banner from Bloomberg. Biotech history made. Chimera Global acquires stealth startup Vance Biosynth for $850 million. Mark blinked. He read it again. Vance. The screen changed to a photo. It was Serena. She was shaking hands with Julian Thorne. The caption read, Dr. Serena Vance, the new face of billion-dollar biotech. Mark felt the blood drain from his face so fast he nearly fainted. The noise of the city dropped away. All he could hear was the rushing of his own pulse. $850 million. He turned back to Serena, his eyes wide with shock and a sudden, sickening realization of what he had done. You, Mark stammered. You sold today, minutes after you left. Serena smiled. You were right, Mark. I was holding you back. If I had told you about the deal, you would have tried to manage it. You would have gotten involved. You would have tried to negotiate for me, and you would have ruined it. Your departure was the best business strategy I ever had. Mark's brain began to misfire. The shock was rapidly being replaced by a greedy, desperate logic. Wait. He stepped over his pile of clothes, approaching her with a sudden change in demeanor. He put on his salesman face, the charming smile he used to close clients. Serena, baby, he said, his voice dropping to a smooth purr. My God, I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me? This is amazing. We did it. All those late nights. I knew they would pay off. I was just pushing you this morning. Tough love, you know, to motivate you. He reached out for her hand. Let's go upstairs. Let's get this stuff off the street and celebrate. We have so much to plan. Serena didn't move away. She just looked at his outstretched hand as if it were covered in slime. Gary, she said calmly. Yes, Dr. Vance, the super replied. If this man steps 1 foot past the threshold of this building, call the police. He's trespassing. Mark froze. Serena, you can't do that. We're married. Not for long, she said. And Mark? Don't worry about the hotel tonight. I cancelled your reservation. I assumed, since you're the provider, you could find somewhere else to sleep. Maybe Jessica has a couch. With that, she turned and walked back into the lobby. The heavy glass doors swung shut, locking with a magnetic click. Mark stood on the sidewalk, surrounded by his wet vinyl records, while a group of tourists stopped to take a picture of the man who had just thrown away $1 billion. Jessica's apartment in the financial district was a luxury studio that was mostly beige and smelled of vanilla candles. Mark paced the small room, a glass of cheap scotch in his hand. He was manic, his eyes wild. 850 million. Mark emphasized each word, pacing back and forth. Jessica sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through the news on her iPad. Her face was pale. She wasn't looking at Mark with lust anymore. She was looking at the situation with the calculating eyes of a co-conspirator. "It's all over the internet, Mark," she said, her voice tight. "Forbes just put up an article. The Cinderella scientist. They're calling her the next Elizabeth Holmes, but with actual science. She's really rich." Mark stopped pacing and slammed his glass down on the table. "We are really rich, Jess. Don't you get it?" "What do you mean?" "We're still married," Mark grinned, a terrifying expression of greed. "I walked out, sure. I gave her papers, sure. But she didn't sign them. We are legally married. New York is an equitable distribution state. Anything acquired during the marriage is marital property. That deal?" "She signed it today, while we were married. That means half of that money is mine." He grabbed Jessica by the shoulders. $425 million, Jess. "Do you know what we can do with that? I can quit the firm. We can buy an island. She thinks she won? She just made me the richest man she knows." Jessica's eyes lit up. The greed was contagious. "Are you sure? Legally?" "I'm positive. It's the law." Mark pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer right now. We're going to freeze her assets before she spends a dime." An hour later, Mark was sitting in the office of Arthur Finch, his divorce attorney. Arthur was a weary man with a stain on his tie, the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted a cheap divorce, not a high-stakes corporate litigation. Mark had spent 20 minutes screaming his theory at Arthur. "She signed the deal at 11:30 a.m. I have the timestamp from the press release. We were married." Arthur Finch adjusted his glasses and looked at the paperwork Mark had slapped on his desk earlier that morning. He looked at the date stamp on the filing. He looked at Mark with a mixture of pity and disbelief. "Mark," Arthur said slowly, "you filed the divorce petition this morning at 9 a.m. "So what?" Mark snapped. "She hasn't signed it yet. The divorce isn't final." "In the state of New York," Arthur explained, his voice sounding like he was explaining gravity to a toddler. "The date of commencement for a matrimonial action is defined as the date the summons is filed. That cuts off the accumulation of marital assets." Mark stopped breathing. "What?" "The moment I filed these papers for you at 9 a.m., Arthur tapped the document, "the economic partnership of your marriage effectively ended in the eyes of the court. Any debt she incurs after 9 a.m. is hers alone, and any assets she acquires after 9 a.m. are hers alone." The room went dead silent. The hum of the air conditioner sounded like a roar. "But," Mark's voice was a squeak, "but we're still married. Technically, yes, but financially, you severed the tie 2 hours before she became a billionaire." Arthur took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "If you had waited until tomorrow, if you had waited until dinner to give her those papers, you would be entitled to 50%. But because you were in such a rush to get rid of her, you missed the window by 2.5 hours." Mark stared at the wall. The math crushed him. 2.5 hours. 150 minutes. If he had just stayed for coffee. If he had just waited to be cruel. Is there any way around it?" Mark whispered. "Can we withdraw the filing? Say it was a mistake?" "We can try," Arthur sighed. "But she has David Cohen representing her now. I saw it on the news. Cohen is the best shark in the city. If we try to claim the filing was a mistake, Cohen will pull security footage of you leaving the apartment, texts of you telling your girlfriend you did it. Mark, you're cooked. You handed her the golden goose and then locked yourself out of the barn. Mark slumped in his chair. He felt physically ill. His phone buzzed. It was Jessica. Jessica, my friend in HR just told me Serena Vance just bought a 51% controlling stake in our marketing firm. Is that true? Mark, answer me. Mark stared at the text. She bought the firm? The phone buzzed again. Jessica, Mark, the CEO just called an emergency all-hands meeting. Serena Vance is on the video screen. She's firing the entire executive board. Mark, she knows about us. She knows about everything. Mark dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the screen cracking. He realized then that Serena wasn't just satisfied with keeping the money. She was coming for the scraps he had left. She wasn't just a scientist. She was a dissectionist, and she was about to take him apart, piece by piece. The lobby of Apex Strategy Group was usually a hive of aggressive energy, filled with junior associates, sprinting with coffee, and partners shouting into phones. When Mark Sterling burst through the revolving doors 20 minutes after dropping his phone, the silence hit him like a physical blow. It wasn't empty. It was paralyzed. Receptionists were whispering behind their hands. Associates were huddled in cubicles, staring at screens that showed the plummeting stock price of their own agency, followed by the jagged spike of a massive buy order. Mark ran toward the elevators. His security badge didn't work. The light flashed red. Access denied. "Hey!" Mark shouted at the security guard, a man he had ignored for 5 years. "Open the gate! My badge is malfunctioning." The guard looked at him, then down at a clipboard, then back at him. "It's not malfunctioning, Mr. Sterling. Your clearance has been revoked, pending the emergency board meeting. You'll have to take the freight elevator to the conference floor. Escorted." Mark felt the humiliation burn his neck. "I am a senior vice president." "Not anymore, buddy," the guard muttered, stepping out from behind the desk. "Come with me." Mark was marched into the freight elevator, which smelled of cleaning solvent and trash bags. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, he stepped into a scene of corporate execution. The glass walls of the main conference room were unfrosted, transparent for all to see. Inside sat the managing partners of the firm, men who had been Mark's mentors, his drinking buddies, his idols. They looked terrified, and at the head of the table, in the seat usually reserved for the CEO, sat Serena. She was still wearing the Tom Ford suit. Her hair was still perfect, but the laptop in front of her wasn't displaying a spreadsheet. It was displaying Mark's expense reports. Next to her sat Julian Thorne. He wasn't doing anything but drinking a sparkling water, yet his presence was a clear message. "She has the heavy artillery." "Let him in," Serena said, her voice amplified by the room's microphone system so that everyone on the floor could hear. Mark walked in. He saw Jessica sitting in the corner, mascara running down her cheeks, holding a box of tissues. She wouldn't look at him. "Mark," Serena said pleasantly, gesturing to a plastic folding chair set up in the center of the room, facing the board. "So glad you could join us. We were just discussing the efficiency of the Sterling account." Mark tried to muster his bravado. "Serena, this is insanity. You can't just buy a company because you're angry. This is a business." "Exactly," Serena nodded. "And as the new majority shareholder, having acquired 51% of the voting stock in a private off-market transaction facilitated by Mr. Thorne's holding company, I am reviewing the liabilities. And it turns out, Mark, you are a massive liability." She tapped a key on her laptop. A projection screen dropped down behind her. It showed a timeline of Mark's client dinners over the last 6 months. "You see," Serena began, pacing the room like a prosecutor, "Mark here has been billing the firm for dinners at Nobu, Cipriani, and Le Bernardin. He listed them as client acquisition meetings. but I cross-referenced the dates. She pointed to Jessica. Jessica, were any clients present at the dinner on February 14th? Valentine's Day? Jessica sobbed. No. What about the weekend trip to the Hamptons in April, billed as a strategic retreat? No, Jessica whispered. Serena turned back to the board of directors. Gentlemen, your senior VP has been embezzling company funds to finance an affair with a subordinate. In the corporate world, that's not just a firing offense. That's cause for litigation. Mark felt the room spinning. Serena, please, we can talk about this at home. I don't have a home with you, Mark. I have a penthouse. You have a hotel room you can't afford. Her eyes flashed. But I'm not firing you for the embezzlement. I can settle that by seizing your 401k and your stock options. You can't take my retirement, Mark shrieked. Read the bylaws, Mark. Gross misconduct forfeits all vested equity. It's standard. You signed it. Julian Thorne spoke up for the first time, his voice bored and lethal. My lawyers have already processed the clawback. You're currently worth negative $40,000. Serena walked up to Mark. She was close enough that he could smell her perfume, a scent he realized he didn't even recognize. She had changed everything about herself in 12 hours. I'm firing you, Serena said softly, because you are mediocre. I looked at your portfolio. Your ideas are derivative. Your strategies are outdated. You rode on the coattails of better men, just like you tried to ride on mine. I'm restructuring this agency. We're pivoting to biotech PR. And frankly, Mark, you're not smart enough to work for me. She turned to the security guard. Escort Mr. Sterling and Miss Jessica out of the building. If they try to take so much as a stapler, arrest them. Serena! Mark fell to his knees. It was a pathetic, instinctive drop. Serena, don't do this. I'm your husband. I love you. It was a mistake. I was scared of your success, that's all. I was insecure. We can fix this, with your money and my connections. Serena looked down at him. There was no hate in her eyes anymore, just a profound, empty pity. You don't have connections, Mark, she said. You have acquaintances who tolerated you because you had an expense account. Those are gone now. She turned her back on him. Get him out of my sight. As the guards dragged Mark Sterling out of the office he had once strutted through like a king, he saw the employees, the receptionists, the interns, the assistants he had ignored or belittled. They weren't looking away. They were watching, and some of them, the brave ones, were smiling. 6 months later, the New York Public Library was illuminated in purple and gold lights. It was the night of the Chimera Global Innovation Gala, the most exclusive ticket in the city. The paparazzi line was 3 deep, cameras flashing like lightning storms as limousines deposited senators, tech moguls, and movie stars. It was raining, a cold, miserable November rain. Across the street, standing under the awning of a bodega, a man in a wet raincoat watched the procession. Mark Sterling looked 10 years older. His hair was thinning, and the blonde was fading into a dull grey. He wasn't wearing a bespoke suit. He was wearing off-the-rack slacks and a coat he had bought at a thrift store. The last 6 months had been a lesson in gravity. After the firing, the industry blacklisted him. Serena hadn't just fired him. She had made the evidence of his embezzlement public record. No reputable firm would touch him. He had lost the apartment. He had sold the BMW. Jessica had left him 3 days after the firing, calling him a loser before blocking his number and moving back to Ohio. Mark was currently working as a shift manager at a logistics warehouse in Queens. He spent his days yelling at forklift drivers and his nights eating microwave dinners in a basement studio apartment that smelled of mold. But tonight, he was here. He had read that Serena was the guest of honor. He didn't have a plan. He just had a fantasy, a delusion that if he could just see her, just talk to her, he could remind her of the good times. He could convince her that he had learned his lesson. He needed a lifeline. A roar went up from the crowd. A silver Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the red carpet. The door opened and Julian Thorne stepped out, looking dapper in a velvet tuxedo. He turned and offered his hand to the passenger. Serena Vance emerged. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown that looked like it was woven from liquid silver, shimmering with every movement. She radiated power. She wasn't just wealthy, she was important. She was a titan. Mark felt a pull in his chest so strong it nearly doubled him over. That was his wife. Technically, the divorce had been finalized 2 months ago, but in his mind, she was still his. He pushed off the wall and ran across the street, dodging traffic. "Serena!" he screamed. "Serena!" The security detail was on him instantly. 2 massive men in earpieces intercepted him before he could even reach the velvet rope. "Back off, sir," one of them growled, shoving Mark back toward the gutter. "No, I know her. That's my wife. Serena!" Mark flailed, his raincoat flapping. "Serena, it's me! It's Mark!" Serena paused on the red carpet. The flashbulbs popped frantically. She turned her head, scanning the darkness beyond the lights. She saw him. She saw the wet hair, the desperate eyes, the cheap shoes. She saw the man who had told her she was a burden. Julian Thorne leaned in, whispering something in her ear. He looked ready to signal the guards to remove the nuisance. Serena raised a hand, stopping Julian. She walked over to the velvet rope, stopping just a few feet from where Mark was being held back by security. The paparazzi went wild. The billionaire and the ex-husband. It was the money shot. "Serena," Mark panted, water dripping down his nose. "Serena, look at you. You look beautiful." "Hello, Mark," she said. Her voice was calm, devoid of the emotion he desperately wanted to see. "Serena, I'm sorry," Mark rushed the words out. "I'm so sorry. I've lost everything. I'm living in a hole. I have nothing. Please, I know I messed up. But we had something real once. Can't you help me? Just a little? For old times' sake?" He looked at her with the eyes of a beggar. "I was your husband." Serena looked at him, and for a second Mark thought he saw softening. He thought he saw the old Serena, the one who would do anything to make him happy. Then she smiled. It was a sad, distant smile. "You weren't a husband, Mark," she said, loud enough for the reporters in the front row to hear. "You were an anchor, and I finally cut the rope." "But I made you," Mark shouted, desperation turning to anger. "If I hadn't pushed you, if I hadn't divorced you, you wouldn't be here. You owe me. I was the catalyst." Serena laughed. It was a light, airy sound that cut through the rain. "You're right," she said. "You were the catalyst. I suppose I should thank you." She reached into her small, diamond-encrusted clutch. Mark's heart leapt. Was she going to give him a check? Cash? She pulled out a single coin. It was a quarter. She flicked it over the velvet rope. It landed in the puddle at Mark's feet with a tiny splash. "Call someone who cares," Serena said. She turned around, took Julian Thorne's arm, and walked up the stairs into the light and warmth of the gala, never looking back. Mark stood in the rain, staring down at the quarter in the mud. The cameras flashed a few more times, capturing the pathetic image of a man who traded a diamond for a stone, before the photographers lost interest and turned their lenses back to the stars. Mark was left alone in the dark, soaking wet, finally understanding the true cost of the graduation day he thought would set him free. He was free, all right. Free of money, free of love, and free of dignity. And as the heavy doors of the library closed, sealing out the cold, Mark Sterling realized that some deals can never be renegotiated. Mark Sterling learned the hard way that arrogance is the most expensive luxury in the world. He thought he was discarding a broken stone, only to realize too late he had thrown away a diamond just before it was polished. His story is a brutal reminder that we should never underestimate the people we claim to love, and that the tables of life can turn in the blink of an eye. Karma doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just signs a contract. What would you have done if you were Serena? Would you have given him a second chance, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please smash that like button. Share this video with a friend who needs to see it, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. See you in the next video.